The night before her trial, Marie Antoinette did not sleep, not because she feared death, but because she finally understood something far worse. She was no longer a person in the eyes of France. She was a symbol that needed to be destroyed carefully, publicly, and completely. By the autumn of 1793, the French Revolution had already devoured its own ideals. Liberty had become suspicion, equality had become accusation, and justice had become performance. Marie Antoinette, once the most powerful woman in Europe, was now prisoner number 280 in the Conciergerie, a damp stone fortress that functioned less as a jail and more as a waiting room for execution. History remembers her death at the guillotine, but what happened before that blade fell was far more deliberate and far more disturbing. Before we continue, if you want history told without comfort or romance, take a moment to support the channel. Subscribe to the History Veil, like the video, and share it with those who believe the past should be confronted honestly, because some stories were never meant to be softened. When Marie Antoinette was transferred to the Conciergerie in August 1793, her punishment began immediately. She was placed in a small cell with no privacy, no silence, and no dignity. Guards were instructed to observe her constantly, even while sleeping, even while changing clothes. A screen was installed in the corner of her cell, not to protect her modesty, but to make surveillance easier. She was never alone. This was not about security, it was about erosion. Her routine was stripped down to bare survival: bread, water, occasional meat, no mirrors, no letters unless approved, no news of her children. Silence was weaponized. Days blurred into one another as the outside world decided how to use her. The revolutionaries did not simply want her dead. They wanted her humiliated first. Marie Antoinette had once represented everything the revolution despised: foreign birth, royal excess, indifference to suffering. Whether these accusations were true mattered less than how useful they were. She was the perfect vessel for collective rage, a living explanation for famine, debt, and bloodshed. And so the trial was never meant to determine guilt. It was designed to manufacture it. The Revolutionary Tribunal convened on October 14, 1793. The charges read aloud were extensive and theatrical: treason, conspiracy with foreign powers, sabotaging the Republic, draining the treasury. Each accusation was delivered not with evidence but with certainty. The outcome was assumed. Marie Antoinette was not allowed legal counsel of her choosing. She was assigned lawyers only hours before the trial began. They were given almost no time to prepare. Witnesses were called who contradicted themselves openly. Documents were vague. Timelines did not align. None of it mattered. The courtroom was not interested in truth. It was interested in closure. Then came the moment that changed everything. One of the final charges accused Marie Antoinette of incest with her own son. The courtroom fell silent. This accusation was not introduced for legal necessity. It was psychological warfare. Her son, Louis Charles, had been taken from her months earlier and placed under revolutionary custody. He had been isolated, beaten, and pressured until he repeated whatever his handlers demanded. His coerced statement was read aloud as evidence. Marie Antoinette listened in silence as her motherhood was weaponized against her. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but trembling. She turned toward the women in the courtroom and said, "I appeal to all mothers here." It was the only moment during the trial when the crowd hesitated. But hesitation was brief. The verdict was delivered on October 16th. Guilty on all counts, death by guillotine, execution scheduled for the same day. There would be no delay, no appeal, no time for dignity. Before dawn, Marie Antoinette was removed from her cell. Her hair had turned white during captivity. Her body was frail. She was given a plain white dress. Her hands were bound. Unlike her husband, she was not allowed to ride in a closed carriage. She was placed in an open cart. This was intentional. The cart moved slowly through Paris. Crowds gathered along the route. Some shouted insults. Others stared in silence. Drums beat continuously to drown out any possibility of sympathy. She was paraded not as a queen, but as a warning. Eyewitnesses noted that she remained composed. She did not cry. She did not resist. She stood upright as the cart jolted over uneven streets. This was not pride, it was control. The last thing still hers. At the Place de la Révolution, the guillotine waited. The executioner cut her hair roughly at the neck to clear the blade. As she stepped onto the platform, she accidentally trod on his foot. She apologized. Those were her final recorded words. The blade fell at noon. But the revolution was not finished with her. Her body was dumped into an unmarked grave. Lime was poured over it to accelerate decay. No marker, no name, no ceremony. The woman who had once been dressed by servants and addressed as Your Majesty was erased as completely as possible. This was not justice, it was ritual. Marie Antoinette had to be destroyed not only physically, but symbolically. Her death served as proof that the old world was gone, that no bloodline was sacred, that no past could survive the new order. And yet something unexpected happened. The revolution did not stabilize. Violence escalated, purges intensified, accusations multiplied. Within months, many of the men who had condemned her were themselves arrested and executed. The machine she fed did not stop. It only demanded more. In the next part, we will confront the aftermath. How history reshaped Marie Antoinette into caricature. How her image was simplified, mocked, and weaponized long after her death. And how memory became the final battleground. Because killing her was easy. Controlling how she would be remembered was the real objective. The revolution claimed it had ended tyranny, but it did not end hunger. It did not end fear, and it did not end blood. After Marie Antoinette's execution, Paris did not exhale. It tightened. For weeks, her name echoed through pamphlets, speeches, and taverns. Not as a woman, as a justification. Every failure of the revolution needed a culprit, and the dead queen was useful because she could no longer respond. Memory was shaped quickly, aggressively, before doubt could settle. The image of Marie Antoinette hardened into something simple, cruel, frivolous, detached. The woman who supposedly said, "Let them eat cake." A sentence with no evidence but perfect symbolism. It reduced complex collapse into personal indifference. If the people starved, it was because she did not care. If the treasury was empty, it was because she wasted it. If blood flowed in the streets, it was because she deserved it. This version spread because it was convenient. It allowed the revolution to avoid examining itself. The truth was far less dramatic. France's financial collapse had begun decades before Marie Antoinette arrived. War debts from supporting the American Revolution crippled the state. Poor harvests devastated grain supply. Tax systems favored the wealthy and burdened the poor. None of this could be solved by executing a queen, but complexity does not mobilize crowds. Symbols do. So Marie Antoinette became one. Caricatures flooded Paris. Her body exaggerated, her expressions distorted. She was depicted as gluttonous, obscene, monstrous. Pornographic images circulated widely, not as entertainment but as political weapons. They stripped her of humanity and turned humiliation into public consumption. The same crowd that had watched her execution now laughed at her degradation on paper. This was not spontaneous cruelty, it was organized. Revolutionary presses understood the power of repetition. Each image reinforced the same message. She was foreign, she was corrupt, she was dangerous, she was already dead, but she still needed to be destroyed. Even her motherhood was erased. Her surviving daughter, Marie Therese, was released from prison months later as part of a diplomatic exchange. She left France quietly, carrying trauma no archive could capture. Her son had died alone in captivity, neglected, diseased, and forgotten. The revolution that claimed to protect children had broken one beyond repair. But his death did not inspire reflection. It inspired silence. As the months passed, the revolution devoured itself. The same tribunals that condemned Marie Antoinette turned on former allies. Robespierre, the voice of virtue and terror, was arrested and executed. Danton followed. Hebert followed. The guillotine did not discriminate. It only accelerated. In less than a year, thousands were executed in the name of the people. The revolution that promised justice produced a system where accusation alone was enough. Fear replaced law. Survival replaced ideals. And still, Marie Antoinette remained useful. She was invoked as proof that excess must be purged. That softness leads to collapse. That enemies must be destroyed before they destroy the revolution. Her image justified every escalation, every execution, every betrayal. Only later, when the violence slowed and France began rebuilding, did questions surface. What had she actually done? Archives reopened, letters were read, financial records examined, and a different picture emerged. Marie Antoinette had donated extensively to charity. She had reduced court expenses. She had supported famine relief. She had opposed some of the most extravagant royal spending. None of this made her a hero, but it did make her human. That humanity had been inconvenient. It threatened the simplicity of the narrative. So it was ignored. History often prefers clean villains to complicated realities. And Marie Antoinette was easier to remember as excess than as a woman trapped inside a collapsing system she did not design. This is the quiet aftermath of her execution. Not closure. Control. The revolution succeeded not because it destroyed a queen, but because it controlled how she would be remembered. For generations, school books repeated the caricature. Art reinforced the myth. Popular culture embraced the image because it was dramatic and digestible. And only much later did historians begin to peel it apart. But damage to memory is slow to repair. Marie Antoinette did not cause the French Revolution. She did not deserve the cruelty inflicted on her before death, and she was not the monster she was made to be. She was a person placed at the center of forces too large to negotiate, too violent to escape, and too eager for sacrifice to forgive. Her story reveals something uncomfortable. Revolutions do not only overthrow rulers, they rewrite them. They choose which details survive, which flaws are magnified, which virtues are erased, and once that version is established, it becomes harder to dismantle than any throne. This is why her story still matters. Because whenever societies face collapse, they search for faces to blame. And when those faces are chosen, complexity is often the first casualty. Marie Antoinette was executed by a blade, but her legacy was executed by repetition. And repetition, once accepted, becomes truth. That is what they really did to her before and after her execution. Not just kill her. They decided who she would be forever.